Hi, and welcome back to the Oh Happy Day Sampler Sew Along. Today we are making block 7 for our sew along, and it is the Twinkle and Shine block. You can see the quilt back behind me here. This quilt design was in my sketchbook for so long, and when I decided to write the book Oh Happy Day, I thought now is the time for this quilt to come to life. The fabrics I used are from Zen Chic's spotted line of fabric. And if you are looking for a basic that is not quite a solid but reads like a solid, this is a great new line of basics for Moda Fabrics. It has just a little bit of dots sprinkled throughout, and it adds such nice texture and movement to your projects. If you haven't had a chance to see those spotted fabrics, I can't recommend them enough. They were a lot of fun to work with, a lot of fun to pick out, and they come in just a whole rainbow of colors, so you can surely find the color that you need for your project. The Twinkle and Shine pillow I made using Tilda fabrics, and you can see how pretty it is done up without the holiday flavor that the main quilt has. Let's take a look at the fabrics that we're going to need to piece this block. And really, I think we could call this just ode to half square triangles, because we are going to make primarily half square triangles for this block, and it's going to come together nicely for you. If you turn to page 77 in your Oh Happy Day book, you can see the fabric requirements that you're going to need, and I have mine laid out here on the table in front of me. I do want to mention, let me bring the pillow back into the shot here, that I have decided to use dark fabrics in place of the light fabrics here on my pillow project, and a lighter fabric in place of the brown fabrics. Now, what that's going to do for this block is, rather than the focus being on these star points like it is in the pillow, it's going to frame out the block. It's going to give it just a really pretty frame. You're going to see what I'm talking about once we have the block pieced at the end of the video, but it's something that you might keep in mind when you start choosing fabrics for this block yourself. So on page 77 in your Oh Happy Day book, you are going to cut the fabrics listed from the brown floral, cream solid, and light floral. So my brown floral is the yellow. You need 4 squares. My cream solid, I'm using the white on white from Buttercup and Slate. I have 6 squares cut. And then from my light floral, again, I've chosen the dark. I have 6 squares in a larger size, and then 4 squares cut in a smaller size. Now, like I said, we're making a lot of half square triangles. So these units, all of these larger squares, we are using to make half square triangles. You can go ahead and pair. In my book, it is light floral, but it's actually my dark floral. 4 of those with 4 of your background. And then the remaining 2 will get paired with 2 of your other print. And lastly, these 2 get paired with these 2. And half square triangles across the board for all of these groupings. I am going to go ahead and go sew up my half square triangles. And if you turn to page, let me flip here in my book, page 72, that is where you will find the written piecing instructions for this block, and that is going to tell you the size that you need to trim all of your half square triangles to. They are all made exactly the same and trimmed all to the same measurement. So you will find that information on page 72, starting in step 2. So let me go sew those up. I have those half square triangles sewn and pressed. You will find the pressing instructions for the half square triangles on page 72 of your book. Let's just go ahead and take a look at what I've got down here in front of me. Everything has been trimmed according to what the book says. I have 4 of the half square triangles with both prints, and then I have 8 with the dark, and then also the background, and then I have 4 with the light print and the background. And we have just one more step to take before we sew everything together. So if you lay out your half square triangles just like this, the ones that you're going to be using for the center portion of your star, put the white on the lower left side, and we need to make some stitch and flip corners using our remaining dark squares. Now, if you watched the proposal block tutorial, you know that I have a certain way that I like to do my stitch and flip corners. You will, and you need to make sure that you put it on this lower corner right here. So you'll put your little square right sides together, draw your diagonal line from corner to corner. That's easier to do before you place these units right sides together, but I just wanted you to see the orientation of the diagonal. So top right to bottom left, and sew on the diagonal, press everything out. Make sure that everything lines up on these edges here. You don't want anything overhanging on the back or on the front. You want everything to measure exactly the same after we add our stitch and flip corner as it did before we sewed that corner to it. And that is easiest to do if we press, make sure everything lines up, and then trim out those bottom 2 layers. And that's exactly how I like to make these units. And if you're following along, like I said, you've seen me do this technique in that proposal tutorial video. So I am going to go ahead and get these corners sewn on to all of these bottom half square triangles. The piecing instructions are on page 72, and you're going to see this in step number 5. And then after you press everything out, make sure that it all matches perfectly, trim out those bottom 2 layers, then you're going to go ahead and press those seams open. And I'm going to do this and then show you how these completed units are going to look. This is what your unit is going to look like after you have sewn it, pressed it, and then press that last seam open. And I did save one to show you what I was talking about just a moment ago, just in case you didn't see that proposal video. So this unit right here, I have sewn my square onto the half square triangle. I've pressed it out, and now I can easily see that it lines up along these edges here. I can flip it over to the back and double check on the back to make sure that there's no fabric overhanging and make sure that I've sewn that accurately. And then the next step is just to trim out those bottom 2 layers. You would use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just gonna trim that with my scissors here. And then the final step is to take this back over to the sewing machine, and you want to press that last seam open. I'm going to press that open, and then I'm going to lay out my half square triangles into the orientation that they need to be laid out to complete the block, and I will show that next step to you. And I have everything laid out in front of me here. Now, the trickiest part of sewing the rest of this block together is making sure that you orient the half square triangles in the right direction so that it creates the pattern that you want. You'll start by sewing together your block center. So those half square triangles that have the stitch and flip corners, you're going to sew these 2 together, and you will find all of the piecing instructions for this portion of the block on page 74 in your Oh Happy Day book. So that's going to be very helpful for seeing how to press everything so all of your seams nest, as well as just getting another visual, because you do want to have everything going the right direction. So begin by sewing together this center portion of the block. You'll sew together 2 pairs, the top and the bottom, and then sew together those 2 units. And then the next thing that you'll want to do is sew together these pairs. These are all the same around the edge of the block, so you'll sew together 4 pairs of those. And then you can go ahead and sew 2 pairs to the sides of the center that you pieced. And then you'll have 4 half square triangles left over that have not been sewn to anything just yet. Sew those to the sides of these remaining pairs. Once you have all of that done, you'll have this longer row done, you'll have your center row done, and you'll have your bottom row done. And then it's just a matter of sewing together those 3 strips. And like I said, all of your pressing instructions are found on page 74 in your book, so do reference those so that everything nests just perfectly. I'm going to sew this together, and then I will show you the completed block as well as how the pressing looks on the back. And we have a completed Twinkle and Shine block. Now you can see what I was talking about, how that gray fabric frames out our center star points. Rather than having the star points be highlighted, these dark gray fabrics kind of frame out that center, which I think is really pretty. I want to talk about the pressing just a little bit more on this one. If you followed the pressing instructions in the Oh Happy Day book, this is what the back of your project is going to look like. And I do want to talk about the nesting a little bit because not all of the seams are nesting perfectly. Just because of how everything comes together, just about everything nests perfectly, but not quite everything. Where you have these units coming together, your two different prints in the corners, right here, here, and then right here, these seams are not going to nest. But we need this seam going the direction it's going so that it nests with this seam, and so that it nests with this seam, and it kind of creates a whole domino effect of if we change one, then we have to change more, but then there's still going to be one that just doesn't quite go the direction we want it to. So I sewed it with pretty much everything nesting except for those 4 seams that I just mentioned, because they just aren't going to. If that's something that's going to bother you, you can opt to press these outside corners open. If you press those open, that's going to eliminate the bulk that you might encounter in these seams that I mentioned. Everything lays nicely everywhere else. So pressing, you wouldn't necessarily need to press these open or this one. It's just these outside 4 corners. If you wanted to press those open, you could, just to eliminate a little bit of bulk, like I said. Now, I know some of you automatically switch all pressing directions to open wherever possible because you love pressing open. I prefer to nest seams as much as possible. And even in a block like this, where not quite everything is able to nest like we would normally want it to, I still prefer to do nesting and just take that little bit of doubling up right here in these seams. You can see that it still lays nicely, but that is an option that you might want to take if you wanted to press those outside corners open. So that is our block for today, Twinkle and Shine. I hope you have a lot of fun piecing this one up, and I'll catch you again next time.